So this video is a continuation of the process for conducting a community needs assessment. Just as a reminder of the process, we have already talked about the target audience, and the example we've been using in this particular set of videos is the school children, and we've determined the purpose of our needs assessment as well. We set goals and objectives around our needs assessment, and now we're thinking about what kind of data collection tools could we use to accomplish goals and objectives. So one video already talked about qualitative methods you could use. This video is going to talk about possible quantitative methods you could use in a needs assessment. We're going to focus on 3 areas of quantitative methods. So in a needs assessment, you could survey your target audience or target population. You could do screenings of your target audience or population, or you could do direct assessments. Let's talk a little bit about surveys. So there are different formats you can use for surveys, and you have taken surveys before, I'm sure, because one of them I know you've taken are course evaluation surveys, so to give feedback on the course that you've taken, and that is done in an online format. You may have even experienced other types of surveys outside of that. I know for me, I've experienced telephone surveys and more recently through text messages. So, for example, the cell phone company that I use, they will send a satisfaction survey through a text message. So you can see that there are different formats you can administer surveys. Written would be an actual hard copy format, and then face-to-face would be a verbal type of a situation. So you can imagine that each of these have strengths and weaknesses of each format. And in a little bit, you're going to be looking at your course packet to see examples of these different types of surveys. And so when you think about a written survey, some of the strengths are that you can sometimes disseminate to a large group and get feedback. Sometimes people are not technology savvy, so some of those other formats may not be as useful. And maybe a sensitive topic where doing something in telephone or face-to-face may not be preferable, because if it's a sensitive issue, they may not want to verbalize it to someone. So written format could be useful there. What about weaknesses? Well, you have to think about your target audience and thinking about your target audience or population for your needs assessment, and thinking about literacy issues, any vision impairment issues, and then also, excuse me, thinking about how you might reach them through written. Are you going to have to administer in person, which would take more resources, both time and human resources, as well as economic resources to pay the person to do it, to administer that in person? You could mail it out, which could be a wider distribution. However, that does incur costs as well. Telephone. One of the challenges now is that trying to get telephone numbers is not what it used to be. You used to be able to have telephone books which provide local phone numbers for people, but now with cell phones, it's not as easy to get to those cell phone numbers. So using a telephone may not be as effective depending on the access you have to telephone numbers for your target population. Some of the strengths is that if for people who might have vision impairment, or for in that situation, a telephone could be a better option because it's more verbal and it's a little faster than doing face-to-face, because you don't have to necessarily schedule time when you both can be together. Telephone, you can just try to call until you can reach the person. With online, one of the strengths is that it's relatively inexpensive, and it can be disseminated to a lot of people, and a lot of people are more mobile now, and even an online survey can be taken on a smartphone, which a lot of people have now. So it really allows much more flexibility and low cost, and also most of the online programs will summarize the data for you aggregate it and put it into usable format that's easy to analyze or to put into a report with descriptives. So one of the weaknesses, though, is you definitely have to have an audience who is comfortable using technology and who has access to technology. So, and then also the person that's creating the survey needs to be familiar with how to set up an online survey as well. Face-to-face, some of the strengths is that it allows more of a personal dialogue. Perhaps in some target populations, they would feel more comfortable talking to a person rather than putting thoughts on a piece of paper. And I would say, though, a weakness is that it definitely takes more time, it takes more economic resources, human resources, and then for sensitive topics, it really probably isn't the best route to go because of concerns about them having to verbalize something that's very private or personal to them. So when you're thinking about which one you might use in a needs assessment, you really need to be thinking about your target audience and thinking about who they are, what kind of, if there's any kind of barriers that might prevent them from taking a survey, to think through that and which format might be the best. You also have to balance that with the resources you have and the time you have. There are different types of survey questions. So they are classified, and this is a table document from Vena Guidelines through the WIC program. And I like it because it groups questions into 5 different categories. So one type of question you could have in a survey is an open-ended. So maybe it's a what, how, or why. And this can be really useful for looking at attitudes or beliefs without putting a person into a box. It allows them freedom to express what they would like to say around that question. You could have closed-ended with dichotomous answers, and typically dichotomous is going to be a yes or a no. This does make it easy for people to respond. And it provides, a more concrete answer, yes, no. However, sometimes this can be challenging because people may not want to answer yes or no. And closed-ended with ordered or scaled choices. So a scaled choice would be a strongly agree to strongly disagree. And ordered would be something that maybe it's numeric, like age ranges, something like that. So it is easy to code and analyze. Closed-ended with unordered choices, so this could be lists of things. So maybe it's a list of majors, and you have to indicate what your major is. So it does give you information, again, about respondents' beliefs and practices. The last one is a partially closed-ended. So this is any question, and it has an other, please specify category where it allows you to mark other and then to define what other is. So anytime you see an other and please specify, that is considered a partially closed-ended question. So now I want you to take a minute and think. I've talked mostly about the advantages of each of these types of survey questions. I'm going to give you a minute to think about what might be disadvantages to using each of these survey types of survey questions. I'll go ahead and start the timer. Give you 1 minute to think about this. Okay, so hopefully that gave you enough time to think about what might be some disadvantage to each of these question types. Open-ended. One of the biggest things is related to this is that it is respondent burden. So it's going to take more effort for someone to answer an open-ended question. And then also, when you have the open-ended question, then you have to actually code the data to look for commonalities between the responses, which takes more time. Closed-ended dichotomous answers, I already mentioned briefly before that sometimes it doesn't provide you with, you may not want to answer yes or no, you may want to answer maybe or sometimes. So it may not fit the respondent situation, and it really is less descriptive. You end up having only two options rather than various options. Closed-ended with ordered or scaled choices. With this, one of the things that can happen is if you have a lot of scaled choices, respondents may just go through and just mark the same response for everything and not really read the options. With this really happens when you have a lot of items. So if you can pare down your survey to the most pertinent items, then hopefully people will be more truthful in responding to scaled items. Closed-ended unordered choices lists. Well, sometimes you may not have the option that a person wants to mark. I've had this experience myself in taking surveys. Sometimes I will read through the list and I'll want to say, well, this doesn't apply to me, but there's no option there and it won't let me move on to the next question. So either your options are to end the survey and not participate, or you just mark something that's not truthful. So this may be an issue. The recommendation really is if you're not sure you have an exhaustive list, then you always want to add the other option with allowing the respondent to define, which then would move from a closed-ended with unordered choices to a partially closed-ended survey question. So partially closed-ended, this has happened to me before in surveys I've conducted for research, that individuals will mark other, but they won't put anything in the box that says please specify. So then you really don't know what they meant by other, and it's hard to classify that information. So now I want you to identify each question type looking at examples of surveys in your packet. So in C-2.5, you're going to find the different survey formats. And what I want you to do is looking through those, try to find questions that are examples of each of these types, these categories or types of questions. And there are all of those across those surveys, you'll find examples of all of these. So I'm going to go ahead and set the timer for 2 minutes. So hopefully that gave you enough time to look through those survey types. And I do want you to be able to identify, on the exam, if I give you a survey question, I want you to be able to identify which category it would fit into from those listed here. So I'm going to go ahead and go out of PowerPoint for a minute because I want to pull up a couple of the surveys. So the online survey actually has most of the question types in it. So when we start looking at the beginning questions, most of these are close-ended, scaled with ordered or scaled choices. So here's the scaled choices here. You could say that these are scaled choices here. And there's actually mostly scaled here as well. We get down further, this is still a close-ended with a scaled, or this would be an ordered choice. Let's see if we can find any different ones than that. When we get to the demographics, now we're getting into a close-ended with unordered choices or lists. So you can see the gender, the marital status, those all would be considered close-ended with unordered choices. Now here's a unique open-ended question. And now this one is kind of it's not one that where you can get, it's not one where you have opinions or beliefs, but it is an open-end box where they actually respond with new numbers themselves. And this would also be, because it has an other, please specify, this would be a partially close-ended question. And looking at a different survey, this is a food frequency questionnaire. This one actually wanted to show you a dichotomous question. Now there are a lot of ordered choices here, but looking down, let's see. Looking down here, here's a yes, no. So over the past 12 months, did you drink soda or pop? Yes, no. Now this one's interesting because it does have branching, meaning that if a respondent answers no, they're going to jump to question 10. If a respondent answers yes, they are going to ask them for a little more information. But technically 9 is a dichotomous question, yes, no. Something else that you have to be aware of when writing a survey is avoiding pitfalls in how you write survey questions. And again, I want you to be familiar with these different pitfalls. If I give you examples of survey questions on the exam, to be able to identify if it contains a pitfall. So here's my first example. Do you eat fresh fruits and vegetables daily? The pitfall here is it's considered a double-barreled question, which a double-barreled question is when you have more than one subject is covered, but only one answer is wanted for analysis. So if I really wanted to know if the person ate fresh vegetables daily and if they ate fresh fruits daily, I wouldn't know, if I put them together in one question, I wouldn't know if the respondent's answering about fruits or vegetables. So if I'm interested in them independently, I need to ask it 2 different questions. Here's the second example. Given the poor quality and high fat and sodium junk food, how often do you include them in your diet? This one is considered biased or leading. So when you write a survey question where the wording leads applicants to a specific or a desired answer, this is biased or leading. Hopefully you can see an example too, that by having that phrase at the beginning, you've just identified junk food as being not, poor quality and has high, too much fat and sodium. And so that negativity automatically may persuade the respondent to confirm, or to answer in a way that is confirming what you just said about junk food, rather than giving their honest opinion. Here's a third example. How many servings of vegetables do you eat in a typical day? 1 or less, 1 to 3, or 3 or more? This one is considered overlap, which this is responses are not mutually exclusive. I can tell you from my own experience, this can be really easy to do. And it's just so important that you have other people looking at your survey to make sure that you don't make an error like this. Because if someone had 1 serving, well, they could either answer 1 or less, or they can answer 1 to 3. Which one are they going to put? Last example, how often do you eat junk food? This one is considered undefined. So undefined is when you're using terms that can be interpreted differently, or they're too technical for someone to understand. So junk food can be interpreted differently by different people. So it's important that you either provide a definition, that you provide a definition, or that you rephrase the question so you're very clear about what you mean, how you want the person to identify the question. Some other things you need to think about with surveys. One thing we do, especially in research, is measuring validity. Validity really is whether or not you truly are measuring what you intend to measure. The ways we can measure validity vary, but some of the most common ways we do it are through content experts who provide content validity, meaning experts in the topic area, experts in survey research will look at it and say, yes, I think that you are measuring what you have intended to measure within this survey. Another way you can measure validity is through what we call cognitive interviews, and this really gets more at base validity. What we do with cognitive interviews is we actually bring in people from the target population, and we have them evaluate the survey. We have them talk out loud as they're taking the survey to give us feedback on how they're answering, how they're interpreting the question, and then how they come to their response. And from this, it becomes very valuable. It can help you to really know whether or not your survey is confusing. Pilot testing, this is something that you do to, a lot of times, to just see how the logistics of running your survey to make sure that it's actually functioning properly. It can give you a sense of how long it's taking respondents to complete your survey, which can help you to gauge whether or not you need to think about shortening your survey if it's too long and too respondent burden. You can get feedback through Pilot on their perception of how long it took them to take it, whether or not it was easy or hard to take, things like that, and overall understandability. Another thing you can measure is reliability. So this reliability is thinking about how the consistency of responses. And we want to have people answering similarly through over time related to beliefs and attitudes. Now, like dietary intake, of course, is not going to be repeatable because everybody eats differently on different days. There are different ways you can measure reliability. I'm not going to go into great detail in this class with thinking about measuring reliability just because you won't be doing it. You won't be measuring reliability in this class. If you are interested in how that actually happens, what types of statistics we use, feel free to talk to me. The last thing is readability. So this is thinking about at what grade level is your survey. If it's written at a really high, college level, or even 12th grade reading level, and you're working with children, that's not going to work. So, younger children, that's not going to work. So you really do need to be aware of readability and try to make it as simple as you can, but also so reflect the content that you need for the needs assessment. What's nice is in Microsoft Word, it actually will, through the spell check function, it actually will give you a readability score at the end, which is really useful. You don't have to hand calculate it. So remember we talked about 3 different ways you could collect quantitative data for a needs assessment. The first was surveys, and we just finished that. You could also use screenings. What kind of screenings are we talking about? Well, in a needs assessment, maybe common ones could be blood pressure, maybe you're screening for blood cholesterol levels, maybe you're doing blood glucose checks. Some of the concerns with using screenings within a needs assessment is you have to make sure that you're using equipment that is accurate, that you have confidence in that it's really measuring accurately. So think about blood pressure. You can have some of the auto blood pressure cuffs, or you can have someone manually be measuring it, but you can imagine that accuracy depends on the level of training of the person taking the blood pressure, and then also the level of accuracy if you're using an auto equipment, how accurate is it of someone's blood pressure. Some of these are more invasive than others. Thinking about taking blood cholesterol or blood glucose are a little more invasive. So some people may not want to have that screening done because of that. The other thing is cost. You not only have to have the equipment and someone who is administering it, but you also have to have the equipment to not only to take the measurement, but also to analyze the measurement. The third type of quantitative method you could collect in a needs assessment is a direct assessment. So these can include things like a dietary assessment. So maybe you're going to do a 24-hour recall, diet records, maybe you can do a food frequency questionnaire or observations in a cafeteria like we talked about with the school needs assessment example. You could collect laboratory data, you could have anthropometric data, you could have clinical data. Any of these could be considered direct assessment. So just a reminder, anthropometrics like height and weight, waist circumference. You can imagine that some of the challenges of doing a direct assessment is this definitely takes more resources. You're going to have more people, more time, and it's going to cost money. So you really have to balance whether or not you have the ability to do a direct assessment of your target population for your needs assessment. This is just FYI. So when you're doing a needs assessment, you may decide that you want to do some qualitative methods, but you also want to do some quantitative methods. So essentially what that means is you're doing a mixed methods approach. You're taking qualitative and quantitative. Now sometimes you could do it in sequence. So you could do qualitative information to then help you to develop a survey, and then you can ask in a larger audience of your target population. Sometimes it can go reverse. You can start with the survey and then realize that you don't understand a phenomenon well enough and need to delve in deeper. And so then you're going to follow up with some type of a qualitative assessment. In your course packet, C-2.4, it gives you an example of how you can connect qualitative data to survey development. Again, this is just some additional information for you to look at if you're interested. That's the end of this section of thinking about collecting quantitative data.